Are brace side sumis legal? If so, please clarify what conditions need to be met. Here is a video example of a side sumi.
5, 6, 7, 8, 1, 2.
This stunt is legal if all parts of Rule 335 are followed, as it is a variation of a braced flip. Please refer to the NFHS rules book and all 6 parts of the rule to be sure the stunt is legal. In the video shown, it is performed legally.
If a team has 8 members, but only exhibits with one stunt group, will that team be scored the same way a team of 7 is scored, receiving 50% of the average score of the 3 highest level skills? No, the team is capable of doing 2 stunt groups, so they are not a majority, resulting in a 0 for that skill. Only teams with 7 or less would receive the points that are assigned to their skills. That total is divided by 3 and then divided by 2.
On the latest progression sheet, under tosses, double skills to cradle twisting starts at a 7.9. However, a hitch kick single is listed as an 8.4. What is the difference? Would a switch kick single then start at a 7.9, or would it be given a start value of an 8.4, similar to the hitch kick single? Great question. The 7.9 is a score in reference to other dismount scores and is not a direct relation to the tosses. Yes, the flyer is doing the same thing, but the bases are doing a more difficult skill. And in addition, dismounts are scored lower so that the team does not just use these to get their points. What would a quick toss to extension score? Because the question does not define the number of bases, we would need to look at 2 possible skills. One being a single base toss to hands, and another skill might be the quick toss to extended. In order to find the answer to the question, we would look at the coach's stunt tosses progression sheet. For a one-man stunt, I would look in the advanced column where we can see a toss to hands extended, assisted, at an 8.0, and a toss to hands extended, unassisted, at a 9.0. A quick toss to extended with 2 feet being caught would score at a 6.2. This slide, along with other similar questions that were submitted, may not clearly define the skills. And if you don't find the skill that you're looking for on the stunt or pyramid progression sheet, please contact your section rep and describe the skill that you have in question, and they will submit that to the cheerleading subcommittee to define a score and place that on the coach's progression sheet.
I see teams doing brace flips 360 full twist, starting from a sponge position, which scores 7.5 for dismounts. I also see teams doing brace flips 360 full twist, starting with the flyer standing on the floor. Both skills finish in the cradle position. Do these both score the same? Are they both scored as dismounts? What would you put on a skill sheet to differentiate these skills? Or are they both considered brace flips 360 full twists? If I did each of these within my routine, would they count as 2 of my required stunts? Before I answer your questions on the slide, I'd like to clarify the terms bracer versus post, release versus non-release skills, and flip versus roll. A brace stunt is the connection of a flyer to another flyer. A flyer connecting to a person on the ground for temporary support is known as a post. A release skill only occurs when a flyer has temporary loss of connection to all participants on the ground. In many cases, the flyer maintains contact with a bracer while performing a release skill. A braced flip is hip overhead rotation of a flyer with no connection to anyone on the ground. The connection is only with the bracer. This would be an example of a release skill. A roll is hip overhead rotation of a flyer while maintaining contact with someone on the ground. This is not an example of a release skill. Any variation of a suspended roll, including the suspended front roll, full twist is not considered a release skill. The above photos are all examples of brace stunts. However, a common misconception is that the bottom photo is an example of a braced flip. Note the connection of the flyer's hand to a post on the ground. That makes this a roll, not a flip. As a roll, this would also not be considered a release skill. I have seen several instances of coaches noting this skill on their skill sheet as a pyramid skill labeled braced flip. This is an example of a skill involving a post, not a bracer. This is also a roll, not a flip, because the flyer is connected to someone on the ground during the hip overhead rotation. This skill would be labeled forward suspended roll to new catchers. As this is not a brace skill, it does not count as a pyramid skill when used in isolation, meaning the flyer returns to the ground after performing the skill. To make this skill part of a pyramid, it could be performed as an entrance into a pyramid, where the flyer then transitions to a skill involving a bracer without returning to the ground. It could also be performed as a dismount skill at the end of a pyramid sequence. However, as a dismount, it must be performed in stunt majority. Please also note that since the flyer was also in contact with someone on the ground, this is not a release skill. While we are clarifying releases, I would also like to point out that to qualify for any of the skills that say the word release in the skill, or fall under the inversion at prep, release to extension or single leg category, the flyer must lose all contact with everyone on the ground. Otherwise, it is not a release transition. For example, if you are in a shoulder press at shoulder level, as shown in the picture, the flyer can't just drop her legs while keeping her hands on the base's shoulders, then stand up in a prep. No release occurred, so it would not qualify as a shoulder press at shoulder release to prep. Returning to the original questions, as a brace flip with a 360 full twist is illegal, I'm assuming this question is referring to a suspended forward roll with a full twist, also known as a Baja, which has a start score of 7.5 when starting from a loader prep level. If a suspended roll with a full twist starts with a flyer on the ground, this skill is known as a whirly-bird from the mat, which has a start value of 6.5. These are two different skills and therefore can count as two of your required stunt skills. Whether or not these skills count as dismounts depends on what happens right after the skill is executed. If the skill is performed and the flyer returns to the floor ending the sequence, then the skill was considered a dismount. If the skill is performed, then the flyer transitions to another skill or stunt without returning to the floor, then it was considered a transition, not a dismount. Keep in mind, the only time this differentiation would matter is in a pyramid sequence, because the dismounting skill must be in stunt majority to count as one of the three required skills.
What constitutes an advanced 2.5 release versus an elite 2.5 release for pyramids? Advanced transitions passing through 2.5 are head over heel rotations and straight ball up variations. Elite are hip over hip rotation. Take a look at the next slide for picture examples. The foot or feet of the flyer must be above the head or heads of the bracers, who must be standing straight up in the prep for either advanced or elite while maintaining the proper connection. Let's take a look at the next slide for some examples. Here are some examples of advanced versus elite transitions passing through 2.5. Note that each one shows you that it's head over heels or ball straight up skills for advanced and hip over hip rotation for the side star or kick full. Note that the bottom picture would not qualify because the feet of the flyer do not go above the head or heads of the bracers. This would only count as a release move, not a transition passing through 2.5 high.
Do multiple release moves required to receive a score of 9.1 or 9.5 all need to end in an extended position or on a single leg? The release moves for any skill involving releases only require that the flyer loses contact with all participants on the floor, so hitting an extended position or a single leg position at the end of the release is not required. If I have 3 stunt groups performing a pyramid sequence, what is the minimum number of releases I would need to perform to receive the skills multiple release moves with all top people and multiple or advanced or elite transitional sequences passing through 2.5 high? In order to receive the multiple releases by all top people, each of the flyers must perform 2 releases. Then to receive the multiple 2.5 high releases, there must be 2 additional releases, one being an advanced 2.5 high release and one being an elite 2.5 high release. The diagram at the bottom shows an example of how this could be achieved.
In the October questions, you said that if you perform multiple release moves, that you could also get credit for one other skill used in your releases. Does this mean that if you do the multiple release moves and one of the flyers does a front flip and a back flip as their release moves, that this can also count as the multiple advanced transitional sequences passing through 2.5 high? So you would get credit for both multiple release moves and multiple advanced transitions. You would just need one other skill in your pyramid, correct? If a team does multiple releases by all flyers, for example, and within that same sequence does 2.5 high transitions, you would only need one more skill. The judge can pull the 2.5 high transitions out of the multiple releases by all and bump that score down to 9.1. If the team started at multiple releases by multiple flyers and not by all flyers, and they were starting at the 9.1 value, and the judge pulled out the transitions passing through 2.5 high as a second skill, then the score for the multiple releases would drop to a 7.5, and the team would also get credit for those 2.5 transitions. It would depend on whether the team does 2 advanced, as this team is doing, an advanced plus elite, or 2 elite transitions, and then they would also get the credit for the multiple releases. We wouldn't be able to figure that score out until we saw whether or not there were multiple releases by all flyers or by pulling those releases out to give the 2.5 transitions, if that would bump that score down. As long as a coach is aware that if they are using a sequence for releases and within that sequence they're also counting on those transitions through 2.5 high, that as a second bullet, that they are well aware that they are not going to get full credit for all flyers releasing multiple times. That there's going to have to be a give and take because we are taking something out of those releases to make sure that we get those 3 required skills. Also, be sure to go back and take a look at the part of the video that talks about the difference between advanced transitional stunts, advanced and elite, and elite and elite. Remember that the feet of the flyer have to be above the head of the bracer in order for that to be a transition that passes through 2.5 high.
For sprinkle points, can you explain if it's per skill or an overall at the end? For example, if my team does an entry skill cartwheel to prep with a front, then a full up to extension with a front, then a dismount double skill to cradle, no front, would they get the 3 scores and then a 0.6 added to the dismount since it was the only skill that did not use a front? Or would the whole sequence not receive any 0.6 because only one of the 3 skills did not use fronts? It's important to remember that the sprinkle points are added per skill. So in your example, they would receive the 3 scores and the 0.6 would be added to the dismounts since it was the only skill that did not use a front. As a rule of thumb, if some of the stunts are without front bases, then the team will receive an additional 0.2 per skill. If most of the team are without front bases, then the team would receive an additional 0.4 per skill. And if full team or all of the stunts are without front bases, then the team will receive an additional 0.6 per skill.
How do you differentiate between a handstand to prep and a front handspring to prep? Is it the speed of the approach? The picture below shows a handstand to prep. In this stunt, both the flyer and the bases exert energy to transition from the handstand position directly to a prep position. Handstands on the ground can also be transitioned directly to extended positions without stopping at prep level for higher point values. In a handspring to prep skill, the flyer starts behind the bases and the spotter. To count as a back handspring and not a front walkover, there are two key elements that must occur. First, the flyer must have momentum behind their entrance by either having a running approach or a power hurdle. Second, the flyer's feet must enter the base's hands at the same time. If the flyer has no momentum behind their entrance and just steps into the inversion, or their feet go into the base's hands at different times, this would be considered a front walkover to prep. Again, these skills can also go directly to extended positions instead of a prep for higher point values. I'd also like to clarify the term front spot used in our sprinkle scoring system. It is a general term referring to an extra base or spotter used in a stunt beyond the basic 2 bases and 1 spotter. The positioning being in the front doesn't necessarily need to occur. For example, in stunts like the front handspring to prep, a team may choose an extra person in the back to help assist in lifting the flyer's upper body into the intended vertical position. A team that selects to use this extra person would not receive sprinkle points for no front spots on this skill. Please clarify what handstand to single leg means in the stunt rubric. Here is an example of a handstand to single leg. Similar to the skill handstand to prep, the flyer plays a large role in this skill by pushing herself off the ground with the assistance of the bases, directly to an extended single leg position with no stopping at prep level.
What score would a handstand to teddy bear receive? Would it be the same as a handstand to prep since it is a prep level skill? It would receive an entry score of 6.4 inversion to prep level. For a 2-skill twisting dismount, can a team put up an extended liberty, bring it through the prep level, and then extended level again to throw for the twist cradle? The 2-skill dismount must happen during the dismount. It is not part of the building skill.
If you have general questions about these modules or any of the webinars that you have seen so far, you can submit them to the questions link below the modules on the NYSPHSAA website, and they will be answered in the next upcoming webinar. Good luck to all of our teams as you begin your winter competitive season. We look forward to your questions and to our next webinar.